All right, this is the third class on the Anapanasati Sutra, and the core teaching on the Anapanasati Sutra is the 16 steps, and the 16 steps of breathing. Hopefully, you've read and studied before coming here today. They focuses on in-breathing and out-breathing, and the purpose of this is to develop mindfulness. And so, as the Buddha says, when mindfulness of breathing is developed, the four foundations of mindfulness are fulfilled. And so by doing this practice, you are actually developing a meditation that we can call the Satipatthana meditation, which is described in Majjhima Nikaya number 10. There are similarities and differences between Satipatthana meditation and Anapanasati meditation. Historically, there is a great divide in the ways. It's funny that in Buddhism, sometimes there's just like one reference to one definition in the entire in this giant canon, and we talk about that division for all time. For example, there's like one place where the Noble Eightfold Path is reduced to Sila Samadhi Panya. There's like one or two places in the entire canon, and we talk about it all the time. Sila Samadhi Panya, virtue, concentration, and wisdom. In a similar way, there aren't a ton of discourses that divide vipassana and samatha meditation from each other. The Buddha did say that, if you are skilled in samatha meditation, you should go find someone who's skilled in vipassana and sort of in insight, rather. And likewise, if you're have a tendency to have a quick mind and quick understanding of things, but you might not find it very easy to concentrate and focus your mind, you need to go find someone who can help you develop them. Ideally, I think if you look at all the teachings about samatha or calm meditation and vipassana, they're saying you need both qualities. They're qualities of mind rather than methods. And I think modern teachings tend to talk about these styles as if they're methods. And part of that discussion comes from this book. It's an ancient commentary called the Visuddhimagga. Not that ancient, it's about 800 years after the Buddha, but it's one of the main commentaries in the Theravadan Buddhist tradition, gathered together from ola leaves that were written down in Sri Lanka. I think he originally came from Magadha, the Buddha's neck of the woods, where he did most of his teaching in India. And he went to, I think, the Mahavihara in Sri Lanka and consulted with the monks who had some writings that we've lost, potentially, now. Some of them we still have. They're in the commentaries. We have commentaries on each of the major discourses. The commentaries on the Anapanasati Sutra are extensive. The commentary on the Satipatthana Sutta is also quite extensive. Fortunately, a lot of monks have tried to translate both commentaries, but most commentaries aren't translated. You have to know Pali to be able to understand them. The framework that the Visuddhimagga, this ancient commentary, is imposing on the Anapanasati Sutta is that it does adopt the general framework and the book begins talking about virtue and the importance of developing virtue before you develop a meditation practice. And then it goes into samadhi. There's this whole samadhi section, and then there's a whole panya section. So he takes the whole of the Dhamma and and makes it a reflection of the path, which is a really good thing, the Noble Eightfold Path. It's a good organization. It doesn't follow, there are not 8 chapters or major divisions following each of the Noble Eightfold Path, but it's the threefold view of the Noble Eightfold Path from Majjhima Nikaya number 44. It's so crystallized so well by Sister Dhammadina. Anyway, the main point I wanted to say is most people view this sutra through the eyes of the Visuddhimagga, the commentaries, rather than actually getting down and looking at what it's actually saying. It's had a huge impact on Theravada Buddhist views of this sutra. Everyone sort of sees it through those angles. And does anyone remember any other sutras where the Buddha teaches the 16 steps, by the way, before I get in too much into any deeper? Does anyone remember?
There was one where he taught 16 forms. I don't remember it being 16 steps.
I'm not forms. I'm not.
He talked about the graveyard meditation.
Well, that's in the Satipatthana. It's one of the. Yeah, it's one of the.
I heard it as forms and not steps.
Because the Satipatthana goes into the aggregates.
Right.
So, just the fourth.
But that's in the Dhamma. It's in the fourth foundation.
Right. Foundation.
Let's. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Girimananda Sutra. It's not well known in the West, but it's a major sutra for most Asians in Southeast Asia who are Theravada Buddhist. It's recited a lot. It's supposed to be a sort of healing sutra, and so I think Girimananda was ailing, and the Buddha taught someone these 10 meditation types, and then had him go teach Girimananda. The 10th one are the 16 steps, and they begin with impermanence, and there are 10 sanyas or perceptions. And it's interesting that in this sutra, it looks like breath meditation is presented first, right? So calm, and then we go and we develop what? They fulfill the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, we then develop the 7 factors of enlightenment, and then we lead to full knowledge and deliverance, which are the 9th and 10th factors of the 10-fold noble path. So hopefully you followed what I just said. But he's basically saying you can attain enlightenment by just practicing the 16 steps, as long as you follow the orientations that he's giving here.
Robert, what goes out from the Mahasi tradition?
I'm sorry?
The Buddha goes out, the person
Goodness, no. No. This is long before Mahasi.
Long before, okay.
Yeah, so say, I forget whether it's between 200 or 400 AD,
Okay.
around that time period. I should look up the date. But my point was that the Anapanasati Sutra places the 16 steps at the beginning, and that just by doing them alone, you can develop the higher stages. So you're developing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and then the 7 factors of enlightenment, just by doing breath meditation. And it's how the most common form of meditation that the Buddha taught to people. It's the one he was practicing, Anapanasati, when he gained enlightenment himself. He was practicing breath meditation when he parinibbanaed or died. He attained full enlightenment from the 4th jhana, according to Mahamoggallana, who read his mind at the time. And yet, interestingly enough, the Majjhima Nikaya number 62, which is one of the Buddha's teachings to his son, Rahula, develops the 16 steps only after developing the wisdom of reflecting on impermanence. I don't know if you've ever read this one recently, Majjhima Nikaya number 62, but there like the Girimananda Sutra, the 16 steps are presented at the sort of end of the path after some preliminary wisdom has been cultivated. How is this wisdom taught to Rahula? He's taught to reflect on the elements, the dhatu, or the properties. So he reflects on the earth element, and he says, and he tells his son basically to develop his mind like the earth, to make it imperturbable, we say in Pali, and so that just like you can treat the earth poorly, you can stomp on it and shout at it and piss on it and defecate on it, the Buddha says, but does it ever shout back at you, piss back at you, or anything like that? And so no, the earth in that sense just sort of takes everything and doesn't shout back. So that's the meaning of imperturbable there, and that's the sort of mind he wanted to teach.
What was the word?
Imperturbable.
Imperturbable.
That's how we...
I don't know.
Ananjaya.
Imperturbable.
Yeah. But it doesn't get disturbed.
Imperturbable.
Imperturbable.
Not able to
Be perturbed.
Yeah.
Do you have a better translation? Let's think about this. Equanimous. Let's just call it equanimous for now. But the Buddha would have used the word equanimous, like upeka, but that's ultimately what he's talking about. But the focus here is that it's unmoved, unreactive. That's the meaning there. But we should keep that. We should keep the word now I can't even say it. Imperturbable. Thank you. I think we should keep that for the moment, because there's a whole sutra and multiple sutras designed to teach that as a sort of method, in a way, not only of perceiving the world in your mind, but we can talk about that later. So we have this grand introduction introducing us to these 16 steps. And they're all focused on in-breathing and out-breathing. And so while we're focused on in-breathing and out-breathing, we're developing these other things. So he says, breathing in long, he understands, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he understands, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he understands, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he understands, I breathe out short. These first two, so breathing in long and etc., and breathing in short, etc., are the first two steps. So in-breathing and out-breathing is connected with each step. And you're doing basically the same perception on each, for both in-breathing and out-breathing.
I have a very basic question.
Yeah.
When you say steps, should we think of this as a clear sequence?
No.
Yeah.
No.
That's kind of what I thought.
Yeah.
It wasn't really.
And that was part of my point of talking about Majjhima Nikaya number 62, the Rahula Sutra, and the Girimananda Sutta, is that these 16 steps are divided into tetrads. So the first one is devoted to body meditation. The first two steps that I just read are actually the first two steps that are listed as a way of practicing body meditation in the Satipatthana Sutta. It's the first method. The second one is the foundation of feeling. We can go over that next. The third one is the foundation of mind. And the fourth tetrad, that is the fourth set of 4 steps, is focused, I guess you could say, on dhammas, but clearly it's Buddhist wisdom. Because the first one is contemplating impermanence. And so some people start with wisdom, contemplating, and some people start with trying to concentrate the mind. Usually it's better to start concentrating the mind, and when you encounter problems, sometimes you need to stop and reflect on them and try and define the source of your your problems and to think about them in terms of Buddhist wisdom. That is, anicca, impermanence, dukkha, suffering, and anatta, not non-self, and other qualities. If you've read, is it this Relaxation of Thought Sutra in the Majjhima Nikaya? I think it's in the late teens or early 20s. Someone could look it up really quick. The Buddha actually realized that he could calm himself down by thinking. And so he actually practiced a thinking practice that was in connection with Buddhist wisdom. And what themes did he take up, does anyone know, in his thinking practice? And what was the result of too much thinking? Fatigue. But what were the themes that he took up? How do you define right resolve, the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path? Renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. I can't say that word either. Having a pronunciation difficulty there. So the Buddha just thought about those three things, and he was able to, and he just thought about them. How can I bring them into my life? Am I really clinging to unnecessary objects in my life? What if I would lose this object? Would I be, et cetera, et cetera? And, is there anything I'm doing that's contributing to harm in the world or for myself? And is there any sort of thinking that I'm doing that's, reflective of not wishing myself well or not wishing others well, and countering it with thoughts of goodwill?
So is with right resolve, is it the first one?
Renunciation.
Renunciation.
Mm-hmm. Thoughts of renunciation.
like
Thoughts of renunciation. Yeah. Resolved that it's the resolve that to be content with the kind of objects that are already in our life and not constantly wanting a better refrigerator.
Sensual.
For a layperson, you could translate it that way. Yeah. For a monk, it would mean much more
than just sin.
But it would be renouncing, that it would be having the wisdom that even to the extent that your body is going to get old, get sick, and pass away someday, it's even renouncing that type of acquisition while still maintaining it, but even doing a better job at it because you're actually more relaxed about it instead of freaking out when you get a minor cut or something like that. That's a type of renunciation, but it's renunciation with respect to all five aggregates, which can be divided into mind and body. So it covers the whole gamut, renunciation, and then
non-clinging.
Is it non-attachment?
No, the Buddha. It's more of the concept of renunciation, of having the wisdom to not pick up new things and cling to them. It's more that side of clinging. It's more the dropping, renouncing. It's that calming type of thinking where you're actually, okay, you've clung to certain things in your life that have put these things around you, but do I need to take this any farther right now? And looking into the wisdom of that mind that actually attracted all those things to you, and maybe even it encompasses generosity, even giving, that in the sense that I have enough, I don't need to be worried to keep acquiring more and more. It's not the mind of acquiring more and more. It's the mind of I have enough and I can let go. Satisfaction. It's close to contentment.
Yeah, contentment.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be sacrifice then.
No, it has a Christian self-punishing meaning, maybe. I don't know. Sacrifice. It's not giving up.
I would imply that you're
punishing.
What you're giving up is better than what you're retaining.
Oh.
gaining exchange.
I see what you're saying.
That's what
Well,
I
maybe
guess-
not.
Well,
In the Christian meaning.
no, in the world, more like common, not in terms of like a sacrifice you make on behalf of others, but a sacrifice you might make for yourself.
I guess sacrifice means literally to make holy in Latin. Sacer, facere, yeah.
Sacred, yes.
Not, yeah.
And
The word,
Well,
yes.
because
So-
it's by analogy to, animal sacrifice.
right, right.
It goes from this is not Christian.
Anyway, I think we've delved into resolve. My point there was that the Buddha had a thinking. He indicated he not only did he have a thinking practice before he developed concentration. I think that's an important point I might have been wanting to make from the Relaxation of Thought Sutra, and maybe to tie it in with the great 40 Sutra. In 120 or 121 of the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha says that right concentration is sort of founded on right resolve. So you have to have these thoughts of renunciation and the peace of non-ill will and the peace of harmlessness to be able to develop proper concentration. And the Buddha found that through a sort of wisdom or thinking practice. So here we have the fourth tetrad, sort of ending the practice of wisdom, but you can also start with it. I think my point is that at the beginning, you're asking whether they were sort of linear steps that we had to follow,
Yes,
and you actually know, especially at the beginning, it's better to be sensitive to your own mind and your own needs, which can change on a daily basis. Sometimes you do need to just simply practice right resolve before you sit down and meditate, to calm down any grudge you might have against someone during the day, which is a thought of ill will, basically, and to identify it and to remove it from your mind. And then you can begin sort of meditating. You can think about, this person's got a short life, I do too, why waste it holding this grudge? That's the type of thought of impermanence that's perfectly in connection with the fourth tetrad, where you breathe in contemplating impermanence and you breathe out contemplating impermanence. And yet it's at the end, but you might need to start your meditation there. Clearly the end of the path ends with a full realization in all of impermanence and dukkha and anatta. But until you get there, you need to be sensitive about what your needs are, and you need to be a good problem solver. You need to identify a problem and be able to figure out which solution you need for it. If you have strong concentration, you might need to focus more time on developing Buddhist wisdom, etc. And the other side is true as well.
So you might give it like a toolbox, kind of?
Think of it as a toolbox, yeah. That's
So you
it.
kind of figure out which tool you kind of...
Buddhist
Yeah,
wisdom.
instead of coming at your meditation with the same tool every time,
Sometimes you don't
people
need
get
a
really
hammer.
frustrated when there's these teachers who try and teach everything is based on, first you come in and you do this, then you do this, then you do that. But those types of things just really don't work. People attain stages of enlightenment faster when they're self-aware, and they can identify what the problems are that they're encountering, and to find solutions for them. And they have, it's important to have humility to be able to ask other people for help how have you dealt with this problem?
Is Buddhist wisdom right mindfulness? Is that as opposed to right? I'm just trying to is it something specific?
So I was using that term loosely, and so you're asking what wisdom is.
Yeah.
So basically,
Refer
wisdom
to-
is the knowledge of the four noble truths.
Right
Okay.
view.
Yeah. And what's the fourth? And the fourth
The path.
is the path, and the path includes right mindfulness
And right.
and right mind.
Right.
Okay. So the answer to your question is yes, but if we work through it that way.
Yes. Okay. I see what you're saying.
I do not espouse the view that it's a noble sevenfold path. A lot of people ignore right concentration, but I take it seriously. The Buddha taught right concentration all the time to everyone, and he did not ignore it. And I think it's a mistake to ignore it. It's, to me, if you have the right approach to the meditation, it's something that just comes along quite well, and it's quite compatible with right mindfulness as well. If you're developing right mindfulness properly, you're going to, and focusing on the breath, you're going to develop some level of concentration that's going to be pleasing and comforting and soothing. So I teach it right from the beginning to beginners. I start teaching people how to be sensitive to the whole body of breathing, following the Anapanasati Sutra. Notice the Buddha doesn't talk about right concentration here. Where does he say right concentration? He talks about right mindfulness. He talks about concentration as an enlightenment factor.
Concentrating the mind.
And what's that?
He talks about
Concentrating the mind. No, I'm saying the word itself. Right concentration isn't in there. And because maybe I'll open up a parentheses here before we move on. Maybe I should sensitize you to the fact that the word sati, mindfulness, might be something a little bit different than right mindfulness. And maybe the word concentration is something a little bit different than right concentration. So be sensitive to those differences, because in the West we talk about mindfulness. We rarely say right mindfulness when we need to say it. But the Buddha had a much larger vocabulary, and he used these words very precisely. He also had the word satindriya, which is the controlling faculty of mindfulness. And he had other vocabulary terms. So why don't we talk definitionally a little bit about what sati is. One way to understand sati is meaning mindfulness is through all the images the Buddha used. Does anyone know any of the stories of the images, similes the Buddha has to help you understand mindfulness? Can anyone think of one, for example?
What comes to mind is the body as the body. When you walk, you do it mindfulness. When you lift your arm,
Yeah,
when you sit down.
Yeah, sampajanya is basically clearly comprehending as you walk forward. Clearly comprehending. I am walking forward. As you're walking.
Even when you go to the bathroom, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Where's Appamada on this?
That's what do you mean?
What is like alertness?
It's like heedfulness. It's a better translation.
Right.
But I'm not sure what your question is.
I forgot the meaning, but it's appamada. It's like a alertness, but
that's fine. But let's. I think I can answer your question in a roundabout way, maybe later on.
Okay.
And so sati, interestingly enough, it comes from the smrti in Sanskrit, right? Smrti, which means to remember. And the Buddha actually defines sati, when he's defining sat indriya, or the faculty of mindfulness, he defines it as the proficiency of sati in a person who remembers things that were done long ago. And so it's the faculty of having a good memory. And it includes, he includes within that faculty the formula of right mindfulness. So what is the formula of right mindfulness? It's kaye kayanupasi viharati atapi sampajanya satima vineya loka abhijja domanasang. So a meditator focuses on the body and he uses the locative in the body, or as the body, with respect to the body. So you see the body, instead of seeing a thought or a concept or an image or something else, you see the body as the body, as being within a space of other bodily things, as being, as not conflating it with other things. And then the monk, and then the meditator is alert, ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with respect to the world. That's the formula for the body foundation of mindfulness. And so what is the feeling foundation of mindfulness? As a meditator is focuses or abides in feelings as feelings, focuses on feelings as feelings, ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with respect to the world. And what is mind? I think you've got the picture now. A bhikkhu is abides in mind, contemplating the mind as mind, and ardent, alert, and mindful, and subduing greed and distress with respect to the world. And the fourth one is a bhikkhu abides contemplating dhammas as dhammas, and ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with respect to the world. So those are worth committing to memory and reflecting on, and in Pali and in English, whatever is convenient for you. I haven't thought about them in English. I hold them in my head in Pali. So sorry for my delay in translating. The steps, the first 4 steps. Now, I wanted to open up a parenthesis here, in other words, and talk about the notion that the Buddha is defining right mindfulness, but notice he uses the word mindfulness within the definition. And that must mean that it's referring to something else, that it's staying mindful of things that you've done in the past that might disturb your present state of mindfulness, and keeping them in the past, and being aware of things that might arise in the present moment that invite you to go back into the world and start wanting to acquire new acquisitions, and not keep your heart in a renounced, non-ill will and harmless state. And so that's kind of the focus of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, is to keep you in your own domain. And so hence one of the similes, so mindfulness here has a relationship to time that is more complex than how it's described in the media and how Westerners have understood sati. It's not just being in the present moment. It has a lot to do with being able to remember the Buddha's teachings and what kind of phenomena are important to look out for that might upset you and cause you harm in the future. What kind of phenomena are arising right now that are a result of things you did in the past or thoughts you had in the past. They're sort of inveterate and ingrained in your thinking process, and you need to learn to drop. So it's a result of having a good memory, being able to stay attentive in the Buddhist sense on the breath. Not only strengthens the memory because it clears that sort of background chatter through meditation, so you can actually improve your memory through meditating. But you also need that memory to remember what areas of your present moment to select and to develop. And that's what the Anapanasati Sutra is telling you to do as well. Notice the present tense is used in the first 2 steps, and the following 14 are all in the future tense. That means you're developing right mindfulness in each of these steps, right? But only 2 of them are in the present tense. It's not about developing mindfulness only in the present moment. You can be, right mindfulness applies to wanting to improve in certain areas in your meditation. And because you need to select experience and develop it to be able to do that. And he's giving you 16 different things or 14 different things to select and develop while you're breathing in and out. So this is why fabrication, a construction of an experience, is very important. It's not just about letting things passively arise and fall out of your mind, as the media wants to describe meditation to everyone for some reason, because it's meditation for lazy people. Because it truly is. You just let things come in and out, but you actually have to be a little bit alert to identify things and to develop them. It's not totally passive. It can be passive when you're exhausted or sick. Sometimes, in your worst meditations, it's going to feel very passive, or when you're very tired. And sometimes you do need to rest your mind. You should not take that as a sign of defeat. You should know, my mind needs resting right now, and yet I still want to meditate because it's calmer than watching TV or doing something else. I want to meditate. And as soon as you notice a little bit of energy in your mind and you can wake up a little, you can start developing these finer and more subtle qualities in the breath and develop them. Or develop wisdom, develop thinking, develop your heart in terms of right resolve, the second factor, as the Buddha did before he even started concentrating his mind.
We can also, within the framework of mindfulness, we can see the Four Noble Truths right there, how we cause the suffering, how even with the breath,
right,
how we create our
own suffering.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's right. You can see it right in the present moment.
I have another really basic.
What's that?
A basic
Oh,
question.
Please.
Well, it's just so the sati, as you're describing it, is about kind of thinking, also kind of identifying, I guess, regularities in the past that have relevance today for kind of being able to find that kind of state that is amenable to, but also what prevents you from getting closer to that state, I guess.
Exactly. So sometimes you need to reflect on, you need to stay focused on the present moment so you can identify what's present in your meditation right now, like frustration. And if an image comes up of something that happens in the past, and new frustration arises and intensifies in connection with that image, you need to have enough of a memory to know that you can identify a cause and effect there. But cause and effect can be very complex. It can also relate back to another experience you had that connected those two things in your mind and that you've ingrained over and over. And it might have an origin at some point in your life. And you might want to reach back. And sometimes you need to take a step back while your mind is calm, and you can actually reflect back to that cause. Because remember the Four Noble Truths, what is the second? Right, the origin, that suffering has a cause. And so it does involve some reflection sometimes. Sometimes your mind isn't, sometimes you can identify something in there, especially in light of Buddhist wisdom, connected to some desire that wasn't even connection with reality at all. It was a desire that became painful for you because you wanted something that you could just, no human being could have, or that just wasn't yours, and you were creating a lot of suffering over that. And so it can be connected to, sometimes you can use the Buddha's formulation of the Four Noble Truths to orient your discovery of a cause in the past. And for that you need sati, you need memory, in the sense of memory. But you also need wisdom. You need clarity so you don't hang out in the past and cause yourself more suffering back there. And when you're done and you discover the cause, you come back to your breath in the present moment. So you're done. And, sometimes it's more of a back and forth seesaw thing until you can actually really fully resolve or let go, at least, of that suffering. And so that the image, when it comes up in the mind, it's like, how I felt it when I was going through an intense abandoning or letting go phase at various retreats, an image that would cause me fear or frustration or hatred or desire or all the sort of things, and I'd notice how they were so connected with other thoughts of desire. Like one thought of desire would be connected to a multiplicity. They kind of held each other together. But the image, when it would come, when it was that intense, would usually feel whole, like a whole identity, like complete with descriptions. But later, when you start contemplating with wisdom those things, you start seeing their causes, that they're generated, and that their causes are also based on other causes, and those causes are based on other causes that are random and didn't have to be there, but they ended up in your life. They weren't things that you can own. They're all dissolving and disappearing in their own way, based on their conditionality, the fact that everything is based on causes. And sometimes I would trace things back, in my mind. I used to play a lot of chess with my younger brother, and I always noticed he could think 20 steps, and I could do like in the low teens when I was never as good as him. But that was enough for me, that I could trace back cause and effect in my mind, even in milliseconds of mind thoughts, and I could figure out how I got there and where I was misperceiving suffering, and I could stop it. And that's where the image no longer became real to me. I would see something that would come up that would make me angry, and it suddenly was like a flame. When a flame starts to flicker out, at the beginning when a fire is raging, it looks thick and dense, and you can't see through the flames. When it starts to weaken, you can see through some flames. They get thinner, like at the bottom of a flame. And it's like those images come to you, and then suddenly they just might appear, and you have no reaction in your mind whatsoever to them, and they just stop arising and stop obsessing you and troubling you. Yeah. So there is a path, and it has a lot to do with of letting go. It has a lot to do with this interconnection between sati and Buddhist wisdom.
But also it's like understanding our interpretations. Like, in my meditation, I see the causes, but sometimes what holds it is what I make it mean. And what I make it mean, it keeps holding it, and it could be something minor, right. But it's there. It's right. There, it's persistent, and it's not until I go in it, and it's just a thought, I made it mean something, and poof. It's just that, so simple, but it's powerful. It just can be something minor. Right. Wow, yeah.
You talk about, I could feel the energy in your voice, and when you were saying holding, and I think it's worthwhile noting that a certain definition of sati has a lot to do with energy and right effort. And so remember, the formulation of right mindfulness includes atapi, or ardency, ardent, alert, and mindful. And that's clearly in the formula. Subduing greed and distress with respect to the world is a definition of right effort. In the Great 40 Sutra, remember the Buddha says there are 3 things that run circles around each of the factors. And what are those 3 things? The first one is right view. Right view runs circles. You can't, the other 8, all the factors of the path can't exist without right view being able to distinguish between right view and wrong view, right resolve and wrong resolve. We often talk about a noble eightfold path, but it's really a noble eightfold one and another 8 of the opposite. Because we have to identify those things, and we have to be able to distinguish between the two, and that's true wisdom from panyati. differentiating between right and wrong in that sense. And what's the next one? Right effort. And so that we should determine ourselves, have energy, give strength to our mind to abandon wrong view and develop right view in the way we see the world. And so that in the formulation, subduing greed and distrust within the world, that reflects our right effort, that we're actually trying to drop things that are causing us suffering, unnecessary suffering. And the third thing that makes the whole path, each factor develop into, it's how you take the Noble Eightfold Path and make it work for yourself, is you have to distinguish between the right and the wrong aspects of each factor. You have to drop the bad one and develop the good, to be hyper-simplistic. And you need mindfulness, right mindfulness, to develop, to keep remembering. The Buddha says that. You need right mindfulness to keep remembering, to keep dropping the bad stuff. It's almost like a level of persistence and attention to detail that relies on memory. So I think I've made my point about memory and how sati is more complex than how we make it out to be when you start really getting into the details, and how the formulation of right mindfulness itself not only includes the word sati and memory, but also the concept of other factors of the path, including right view and right effort and right mindfulness.
Seems like that's how the Buddha attained enlightenment, was with a memory of his childhood in a state that he hadn't previously recognized in his explorations of alternate ways that didn't...
You're referring to the rose apple tree experience, yeah. But that was... it's what triggered his memory that there are pleasures. He was hyper-ascetic, so he was making himself suffer. And he realized that there were pleasures in this world that were worth cultivating, including eating again. But mental pleasures, mental food, like jhana, like right concentration, and that were worth developing. And there might be a little bit of greed associated with them, but it's not like greed for the world. It's the type of, you have to have a more subtle understanding of desire and greed.
Right desire.
It's not every desire that's bad. You need plenty of desire to become a better person and to develop yourself and your character, to gain enlightenment. The Buddha never says right desire, but he just talks about desire in a positive way. He never says this is the right...
Skillful desire.
Skillful desire, thank you. Maybe that word exists.
Desire we can...
I don't remember. What's that?
Desire we can live with.
Yeah. For the moment. So yeah, the rose apple tree. Anyway, how do I want to end this? This is just going to be an exploration as we go from week to week, and I wanted to name some similes and some images and tell you some stories about sati to help give you the background. I don't know, does anyone want to try at trying body contemplation, like reading Satipatthana Sutta on body contemplation and doing breath meditation and ask questions and think about it in terms of your practice and maybe say a few words about it, and someone could do maybe the second one, feeling, or something like that, or the third and the fourth, and we could just maybe it could bring, there's a lot I can add to what each of these steps mean, but maybe it's best if I elaborate in terms of your experience. Might be maybe more fun that way.
Yeah.
So if, no pressure, but if you want to do that, just choose one. You don't have to agree with each other. Just if you all choose body contemplation, that's fine.
There's 4. body,
Four
mind,
foundations of mindfulness.
feeling, done.
Okay. All right. Let's do that. What time is it? Sorry, I wasn't paying attention to the time. It's 6. Okay. All right. That concludes the Dhamma talk for today.
Question. So I read that I was just reading. The internet is so full of information, and sometimes I don't know what's accurate. But I read that nibbana means literally blown out, like a oil lamp.
Yeah, that's right. Extinguish.
Yes, extinguish.
It's interesting.
Does it have any, well, they're not really cognates, but in English, it has any reference, like, to the pieces of the word nibbana, do you know?
Is there a relationship to an English word? Any pieces of it?
Well, there's like these strange kind of across languages kind of
Right.
find these little.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't really know of
Like the
one.
root.
It doesn't come to mind. It's interesting. I brought the Path of Purification. He gives this. He's fond of doing etymological analyses of all the important words, and there's a long discussion of the various etymologies of nibbana, and he talks about vana being
Who's he?
Buddha-gosa.
Oh, okay.
He talks about the various meanings of nibbana in there, but in terms of an English cognate, nothing's coming to me right now. I'd have to reflect on it a little more,
I
maybe.
think also they call it the quencher. It's the quenching nibbana,
Right.
quenching.
Yeah,
I
quenching the
also-
thirst.
I also heard of that.
Yeah.
Like, they qualify it as the quenching, the cooling.
Well, what's really significant is the Buddha uses what we use the noun, like attain. The Buddha used it as a verb. It's an action of the mind.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
And they retained that in some Southeast Asian languages. They use a lot of these words we use as nouns, maybe from our Germanic heritage where we have an emphasis on nouns, but they use them as verbs, and they brought them into Thai, for example, and use them as verbs. I think they use the word to blow out a candle. One of the ways to say that is to nibbana it.
Nice.
Send those to nibbana.
That's so funny. It's funny.
Nibbana the candle.
Yeah. I'm gonna turn this off.